Hey, hi guys. So, welcome. Let's get right into it for today. How is everybody doing? It's Thursday. What's the date? March. Doesn't really matter. It's not like it's something that I normally say, but it feels like maybe I'm getting the inspiration from somebody, but it feels like when I say it's Thursday, I have to follow that up with the date, March 2nd. But anyway, we're here taking a look at some different submissions here for a Gunpla critique from, as always, from the awesome Patreon supporters. So let's see. How many do we have today? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 different submissions, and actually 7 submissions, I think, from 6 different people. Edgar, I think it was, who's there in the chat. Hey, Edgar, has a couple of things that he submitted. Everybody else submitted just one thing, and even his is just a couple photos of one thing, more photos of the other. We'll get to that in just a second. We're going to first take a look here at Shaka's build, if I can figure out what I'm doing here. All right, here we go. Here's what I need. It's kind of a bit all over the place, a bit scatterbrained to start off the stream there. Apologies. It's been interesting couple of days. But let's see. I see Mafuyu is there in the chat as well. We've also got a critique from them, or a submission from Mafuyu as well, which we'll be taking a look at a few photos. So, all right, here we got Shaka's build, which you can see down here, his watermark. You can follow him on Instagram, Shaka Drop Builds. We've taken a look at a number of his different submissions in the past. I think the most recent one we would have seen maybe would have been the Shinanju-stein, if I remember correctly. So there was a couple things that he noted in his email. So this is obviously the master grade new Verka. Let me just check back to his email. So I was just reading through this here, but just to kind of summarize what he said in his email for you guys regarding kind of background information about this build. He said that he loves the Verka design, so didn't want to modify it too much, but just made a few small tweaks. One of which was on the gun. He mentioned about the apart from the 86 rifle, which you can see added onto the gun, apart from the 86 model kit, one of the 86. Did you say which one? The 86 Juggernaut. Yeah, so if you look at the beam rifle, you'll see like these parts here added onto right there. It's from the Juggernaut. Is it HG? From the 86 kit from Bandai. So that's kind of the one main like modification, which I like. It's a kind of nice addition. Those parts fit the design of the rifle quite well. It make it look like, it looks like that's the, I guess, sort of feature that allows, or like mechanism that allows the new Gundam to attach the rifle maybe like onto the side skirt or onto the backpack or something like that. So it looks like it fits the design. The only other major modification that he wanted to point out, aside from how he did like the multi-tone colors, like the multi-tone white, most notably, we'll get back to that in a second, was here, the glowing bits. What he said he used was a Swiss Super Luminova, which I guess is a glowing powder used in watches. And he used that here to add bits onto this to make it to glow right in there. So I'm guessing, like, I know what people normally use for making that sort of effect would be, I mean, I know you can get just like regular glow in the dark, like powder. But then you can also use, what's it called? Fluorescent paints. But then you have to activate it with a fluorescent light. If you just want it to just glow in the dark, like what this is here, without having to have a UV light on it, you need some sort of glow in the dark paint. So I'm guessing that this particular powder is much more luminous than just like regular glow in the dark powder. And it does look really, really good. I mean, looking at it, if I didn't know that it was like something made for watches right off the bat, I wouldn't have guessed that. But now that I know that, it makes me think like, oh yeah, right, that makes sense. It looks like that. So number one, I will just say, like, as far as the build goes, I love the fact that it's only got the 3 fin funnels on there, because one of the things that I don't particularly like about the new Gundam's design is the fin funnels, and a little bit less on the fin funnels, perfectly fine by me. So I'll say I do like that. But no, the that works really well for those glowing bits. And I like that they seem to be on there in like a sensible way as well. It's not just kind of like, let's try to think of every single little spot that we can make glow and just add it everywhere all over. I think that could have looked like sort of impressive, and you can see there's definitely more here on the back, but it's not way too overdone. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, if you're trying to imagine something like this in real life, how many different little lights and stuff will it have on it? Probably a fair amount. I mean, it makes sense. But I mean, as far as the model kit goes, I like the amount of those lights added onto there. I think that works pretty well. Is there a couple of spots? I mean, I don't know where you could maybe have added more. I mean, because you have to think about like what parts. There's not going to be lights like in a vernier, like here on the knee or something, in that little spot. I feel like is maybe something that I would have considered, but then like thinking about it realistically, no, it's just a vernier. There wouldn't be a light in there. And I don't think the beam rifle has a camera on the front of it, does it? No. So there's not any kind of like camera right there or something that maybe would have been a good spot, but it doesn't have that. So no, I like the placement of those. The one thing he mentioned about in his email was about separating the colors. He said that it's hard to notice. He said like according to kind of how I'm reading his email, is that maybe the color separation of like the multi-tone whites and stuff is maybe a little bit more kind of I don't want to say contrasty, but it's a little bit more drastic maybe than he had planned. He mentioned about how once he started putting the kit together, it was kind of a little bit late to kind of realize the differences in the colors. I will say it's not as subtle as I would guess that maybe he had planned it to be. Ash in the chat there's asking what scale this is. This is 1/100 scale. This would be the new Verka. You can tell by the long face. For me, the most immediately the thing that makes it easy to immediately recognize the Verka versus the RG is number one, the psycho frame parts. There you can see the clear psycho frame parts in there, and then also the face. The face looks very different between the two. There's other differences, but those are kind of the most obvious things, I guess. No, so yeah, I think the color separation going for like that kind of RG kind of style, multi-tone white. Yeah, I can understand that maybe it's a bit more obvious than he maybe had planned to do, but I don't necessarily think it's too distracting or anything. It's only when you like really look at it up close and you're seeing like kind of all these colors that it's more obvious. When you're looking at it as a whole, I think the whites are still like close enough that it's not like too apparent that you've got all these different colors of white. I mean, you can tell, and it definitely helps to kind of separate the details without having it just be like all white. But yeah, I think kind of it's that there, I think if there was less of that, if that makes sense, let me see, let me go ahead and do one of these here, pull up the MG RX78 2 version 3.0. The 3.0 is a pretty good example, I feel like, to look at. Actually, now that I'm doing that, I think we can just probably look it up on Dalong. It would probably be easier, but just for a reference for us here, let me go ahead and pull that up for us, because I think the 3.0 is a pretty good reference for if you want to do this kind of paint job, especially on like a master grade kit similar like this. So let me just get this pulled up if I can find it here on Dalong. Pardon me for a moment. Sorry, guys. How am I not seeing it? let's just do this. 3.0. There we go. All right, let me throw this up on the screen for us. This one. So if you look at this, just kind of take this as an example. You've got like a similar concept where you have white, a kind of light gray, off-white, and then you have a tan, like a very, very light tan color. And unfortunately, Dalong's photos aren't really the best. But let's look at this one here. So you can see there's kind of like one of like the darker color panel, like kind of per section. I feel like it's much more limited. Like it's like 70% white, 20% like gray off-white, 10% tan off-white. Basically to kind of summarize what I'm looking at here with that. And if we then look back here at Shaka's, I think the balance is much more, it almost is kind of like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, like 1/3 plain white, and it's probably a little bit more than that. It's maybe like 40% straight white, 40% or 30% like gray white, and then 30% of that. So I feel like at least one of the three colors should have been used less. So I would say probably what would look good would be, like, for example, these arm panels that are in that kind of cream color white, if those would have been just like kind of all white, and then just keep the cream white, you know, a little bit restricted to maybe just this panel at the top of the knee, just the panel at the top of the thigh, not these side ones, and not this one under the knee as well. With a kit like this, and when you have all these panel lines and all these different separate parts, and you have so much opportunity to separate the colors, it's tempting to want to separate every single section into a different color. But I think in a case like this, it may have been better to exercise, you know, a little bit more kind of restraint as far as, you know, deciding what percentage of what color you want to use kind of overall for the builds, just to make it kind of realistic between the color separation. So yeah, it's a tricky thing to do, and something that I feel like, you know, whether it be in these Gunpla critique episodes or in different kind of any sort of other context, when I've been like on with Josh doing the Plamono trend episodes, or giving contest feedback or anything like that, whenever we're talking about people doing this, you know, we very often see that, you know, it's difficult technique to do in a way that, you know, really is maybe like what we would, as builders, especially, you know, being our own worst critics, I guess is the right expression for that. To feel like a complete success in that is difficult to do. And then because, yeah, you're painting every single piece separately, and you're not really seeing it all together until you put all the parts together, unless you kind of have your plan ahead of time. And that's why if you are planning on doing something like this, this kind of painting style, you know, with multi-tone colors, it's a very good idea, especially in this case, to plan your color scheme out. If you can get the line art of the kit that you're building, get the line art, or, you know, make the line art in some way, even if you have to like take a paper over the photo in the manual and like kind of draw a line over it or something like that, and then like scan it into your computer or something, whatever you got to do, just to kind of plan it out. Because planning that out in your computer will kind of, in Photoshop or whatever, if you're able to, you know, allow you to kind of test out a color scheme like this. And if you were to test it out and look at it, and then you might think like, maybe it's a little bit too much of this color, and maybe I want a little bit more of this color in this section, and you want to kind of break it up a little bit differently, you can plan it out. So then when you actually go into separate the parts to paint them, these parts in this color, these parts in that color, it's less of a surprise than when you go to put it all together and kind of seeing how it all looks in the end, if you plan it out. And he didn't mention in his email, Shaka, if he planned it out in that way. He may have, I'm not sure. But anyway, I think that's, you know, not necessarily like, it's just something that I feel like is something we can talk about, but I don't think it's anything that like makes it a bad paint job or anything like that. I think, it's obviously very nicely painted, but it sounded like from his email that even if like that he was at least even a little bit tempted to maybe want to possibly repaint some of the sections, and so I can understand why. But another thing just to point out here, just in terms of like how it's painted, is the pre-shading. The pre-shading is really nice on it. The decals, everything look really smooth. The panel lining, even on this section, like up in here, like if you look on this shoulder section where there's like the pure white and the cream white, that is, I think, just masked right there, because I think that's all one part. So to get that two-tone color, I just kind of masked that. So a nice clean like line between the mask, even though there's like not really much of a like panel line there. So, and then I think, I could be wrong, but it looks like there's a lot of these like little silver accents on some of these parts. Some parts, it's kind of hard to tell if it's like a shadow or like some kind of like light reflection that I'm seeing, or if it's silver, but it looks like there's a lot of these little bits here that are just touched with a little bit of silver paint for accents. They're kind of there on the frame, definitely you can tell for sure there, but those are really nice as well. And you can see like little bits of the frame painted in some of these sections. We go onto here. There's a couple little bits, I think, where maybe some more detail, I think maybe could have been painted. Like in these, I know he was saying that like how difficult it was to use that powder in here, but going in, I've seen like custom builds where they go in and all these little like diagonal marks right there, filling all those in. So filling all those in with that glowing powder, I think would have been cool. I mean, that's, yeah, I know it was difficult to use, and so that's a lot of it to do in there. Quite tricky. But like those details, and then like on the tops of the fin funnels, you can see there's like these little details that are not filled in like with panel liner or whatever. I think that those are maybe an opportunity to just kind of just touch a little bit of gray panel liner or something in there just to bring out those details on the funnels as well. Even though they're there on the back, so they're kind of like in the background, but still maybe would have been nice. And then like little details like here, this little bit right there up inside the funnels, which is just kind of like the attachment point, kind of, right? But if that was painted in like that silver or gray or something, whatever, or even like hit it with like this same yellow color or something, could have been cool. So a couple of maybe like opportunities there in the funnels for a little bit more detailed painting, I think would have been nice. But no, overall, yeah, it's a really nicely painted kit. I do like the small change in the color scheme. I mean, most of the color scheme is kind of like original, except that he did much less black on the feet. If I remember correctly, like this whole section is all black. The back of the foot, I'm not sure about that part. If I look at the back side, I can tell. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I want to say this part here at the back is also originally like that dark blue black color. But I like that there's much less of the black on the shoes. That's an interesting change to the color scheme. So I like that. Yeah, but very cool. Okay. All right. That's that. New Verka. Let's move on to Ryan's. He's open for us. Ryan's working on the perfect grade RX-782 Gundam. And let's see. Get this up on the screen for you guys. Ryan in his email mentioned how this is his first time working on an RX-782 model, which I find hard to believe because I know that he worked on, I guess it's not tech. Oh, there you go. You just got here, Ryan. You mentioned in your email that this was the first time working on an RX-782 model, but you did that RX-782 Gundam head, which I guess is like sort of like a candy toy model, not necessarily like, I guess, like a full-on RX-782 model kit, but it's still the RX-782, right? That you did kind of more in G3 colors, right? But still. All right, so here's what he's working on here. This is the original PG RX-78 so you can see some before and after photos here of the work that he's done. And he mentioned in his email that he wants to limit himself to only doing scribing and plot plate. Was that right, Ryan? Yes, that's true. Just never build the arms and legs. Let me go back to Ryan's email. I think, yeah. So he wants to making it a goal to only use plot plate and chisel work on this. So yeah, so far, as you can see, it looks like here for the most of this is just all chisel work so far, right, Ryan? Looks like to me. At first, I thought when I saw this that you maybe added these kind of sections there in the back of the V-fin, but no, that's on the original kit there as well. And here, this section, interesting. So this is a pretty cool kind of little tip for those of you guys who are wanting to create this kind of this type of detail. This is one of the things that I love about seeing Ryan's work in progress photos, because Ryan's quite good at taking work in progress photos. A lot of us are not. Let's see. Oh yeah, Ryan mentioned I don't want to get DQ'd in case I use it for a comp, right? Sure, good thinking. So yeah, this one, how you can see, like for making this type of detail, if you look at it here at the end, it's the type of detail that you probably have seen on different kits before. So you can kind of get an idea of how he did it. One hole drilled all the way through. Oh, so this would have been plot plate. So you would have had to use plot plate for the back of that to pop a piece. Is that like pushed all the way through, or just like something pushed up from the back, just like a small little detail piece? And then drilling the second hole, not quite as deep. And then you just kind of use a chisel to cut out the difference, basically, kind of between the two to make it this straight kind of lines there across this kind of oval shape, right? That's really interesting. Never seen, not that I can remember, pushed from the back, a plow rod, yeah. So just take a piece of plastic rod, chisel your little notch in that and stick it through, and you can just cut it off and shave it down at the back. So yeah, cool to see that. Let's see some other ones here. Describing this detail. Pretty incredible, Ryan, I gotta say. Is this two parts right there? Was there a seam line here before? It almost looks, sorry to zoom in so closely on your fingernails. But this little kind of indent right there makes it look like that was maybe a seam line there or something like that. Or maybe that's just a little kind of bit there in the part. But yeah, pretty incredible scribing on that. So I'm guessing this is just kind of, you scribe the triangle, or not triangle, the rectangle shape, kind of chisel it out to make it flat, and then you've got to chisel the details inside of there. Close the seam. Okay, yeah, so there was a seam right there. Interesting. Yes, that's just basically the front and back half of the, there you go. Yeah, that one. Of the mohawk, basically, right? Yeah. The size of it, when I was looking at this at first, I looked at the photos before reading the email, and I thought this was work in progress photos from the RX-782 Exceed head model that you did. And I was thinking, oh, maybe he's working on another Exceed head, or it's work in progress photos from the one that you built before. And I read the email, and he said it's the PG. So yeah, this is even smaller, because the Exceed model heads are, I think, roughly 1/35 scale. This is 1/60 scale, so quite a bit smaller than that. So quite a lot of detail. And I would imagine this is probably not done yet, Ryan. Just looking at this, I mean, there's a lot of work there, but I don't know. Are you planning on doing anything more to this on the head or not? Or that's enough? I mean, I think it's a really good amount so far, especially looking at it from this angle where you can kind of see everything. Whereas like for doing this type of detailing, there's not really much that you're going to do to the face. So the majority of the detailing is going to be around on the backside of it. So that's why I feel like looking at this angle is probably like the best way to get a sense of kind of everything that's done on the head. So it's not really going to be too much to do on the front. I feel like it's a really good balance where it's at, where you have a lot of really nice detail on there. It's not, but it doesn't look overly done. Like there's certainly space where you could go in and add some more, but but I like the level that you're at there right now. So I would say that that's a good stopping point, basically. But I'm just curious if you have any other plans. He said, nope, just keeping it like that. Yeah, it doesn't look too busy at all. Yeah, exactly right, Chris. You see, I don't want to say it's a trend, and because it's not exactly something new, but it's something you definitely see with a lot of builds and like a lot of builders, especially like a lot of builds that you see on like Twitter and YouTube sometimes that are like these super detailed builds. And yeah, just from my personal opinion, a lot of times it just ends up looking too busy. It's not to my taste, but I know that there is a contingent of fans who are into that style for sure. And this one is talking about how to make these kind of details. Okay, so he said drilling a hole with the spin blade, very useful tool for sure. Create a flat head rivets with the chisel tip, and then refine the line by scribing with the 0.15. Okay. So to make the line there, rather than like having to kind of like with a scriber, you would have to pull it, right? But it's such a small space, it'd be kind of quite difficult to do. So this is just kind of a trick, I guess. So he said just using the flat head of the chisel, so just pressing the chisel down into there to make your kind of guideline to get you going, and then you can just then very carefully use your scriber to just kind of because I mean that's like a 2 millimeter hole. I'm sure that can't be a very big of a hole, so just pulling like 1 millimeter at a time, then turn it the other way 1 millimeter at a time to get the line like that. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, very nice. This is, I feel like, another opportunity where you could have just done that in the same way as you did on the face with plow rod. That section that we saw, this one, where he's talking about you just drill the hole all the way through and then just scribe on a piece of plow rod and just push it up from the back. Feel like probably could have done the same thing here with this one, right? Considering that hole looks even bigger than the other hole. Like this one on the front, that looks like that's probably like 1 millimeter or 1.5 maybe, and this one looks a bit bigger. But you wanted to challenge yourself, right? Ryan's still waiting on the day when you drop that Gunpla guide magazine. Yeah, Ryan, I think we would all love to see a guidebook. It would be very cool, or at least just like a book of just stuff like this, little tips would be cool, definitely. But a lot of really great work there, Ryan. Obviously, we were just seeing the head so far, but I'm sure you'll probably have the whole thing done by like next week or something, right? So it'll be something to look forward to. Certainly by next month's critique episode, I'm expecting that to be all completely done, right? I'm sure you'll have it ready for us. So looking forward to the updates on that. That's going to be awesome. I love the like the proportions and everything of the old perfect grade. Obviously, it's going to be pretty dated because it's old. It's an old kit, but it's like proportionally and like some of the design of it and like some of the details of it are really nice. I mean, of course, it's going to be quite lacking in detail compared to more modern kits, but you know, with your touch of detail added to it, I'm sure it's going to be awesome. So yeah, looking forward to the update on that. Thank you, Ryan. Very cool. All right, let's take a look at Mafi Uyu's update here next. Let's see. I have extended the arms and legs, but kept the chest and waist the same. Extending the arms as well, too. Interesting. The legs I can understand to give it a little bit more kind of Verka, Katoki proportions, but the arms. Extending the upper arms or the lower arms? I guess the lower arms is also a Katoki thing. Because I'm thinking back to like... what was that? It's in the Gunpla scratch build manual, I want to say. So are you kind of using the Gunpla scratch build manual as like a reference for like modifications to the RX-782's like kind of overall design? Because I feel like that's in the scratch build manual that the forearms are extended on the Verka, if I remember correctly. Either maybe the volume 1 or volume 2 of the Gunpla scratch build manual. Anyway, If I don't see long clown feet on this build, I'm going to be disappointed. Yeah, gotta have those Kotoki style feet on it for sure. All right, let's see. Let's take a look at Mafuyu's work here. So he said it's still quite early and still all plastic. Nothing's painted or anything yet on this work in progress, but just doing some seam line removal and modifications. Inspiration for this is Mash Curiolite from the Fate series. So I'm only very vaguely familiar with the character, but I'm guessing like that's going to be the inspiration kind of for the kind of hairstyling that we're seeing the changes here to this, and then seam line removal here on some of these parts. I'm wondering what glue you're using, because it looks like quite thick glue. Let's see. Using the Mechanical Archive for reference. Ah, okay. Ryan, if you have the scratch build manual, I want to say, I'd have to check it. I have it at home. I want to say it's in one of those that goes over. And I mean, it sounds like just, I can talk to you more about it later because I'm kind of interested, but it sounds like that might also be kind of an additional nice reference for you, but if you think you need it or not. But anyway, Mafi, I know was here in the chat earlier. So if you're still around, yeah, I'm wondering what type of glue that is. It looks like quite thick, and I think that looks like the Tamiya, I think it is, or Mr. Color, like the regular type modeling cement, which is like kind of more, it's like a more thicky, syrupy kind of, what do I want to say? Kind of, it's not super thin. Oh, there you go. I mixed runner scraps and cement to make plastic base. Okay, so that's why it looks kind of thicker like that. So, yeah, I mean, if it wasn't a very clean fit, I mean, that makes sense. Otherwise, I mean, I think just plastic cement should work pretty well for just parts like that, unless that was cut or modified in some way, but I don't think so, right? One thing I was going to tell you or recommend for you for sections like this, like for hair, I know it's not necessarily like hair, but if it's not meant to be a flat spot, or even if it is meant to be a flat spot, I recently got a few of these, and I was using one of these on the live stream the other day. These guys, which are different shape diamond files from Wave. There's some really great options among these, and kind of one of the main reasons why I got these is for details like this, especially kind of concave details, like inside hair parts or something like this. For example, like this is, let me remove that there for a second. Like on a resin kit for like this, if you need to like sand details, which are kind of like the concave details in like hair parts and stuff like that, which is kind of like what you're working on there. Those files are really nice for that. They're just kind of curved. And you can get them in all sorts of different shapes. But like, for example, this one is this one is like round, curved and round. Whereas, for example, this one is curved, the same shape, but curved and triangular. So kind of depending on, it's really good for hard to reach areas, right? Some areas are just easy to reach, which is kind of a regular standard flat file or whatever. But in like harder to reach areas, stuff like in here that you need to sand, those type of files can be really, really good. So if you don't have any of those on hand, I would definitely recommend check out a few. I think Wave makes probably a dozen or 15 or so different shape files like that. But I just recently got some of those, and I'm already finding them quite useful for different stuff like that. So could definitely recommend checking some of those out. But I'm interested to see where this goes. I mean, as far as, I think I did see in Discord another one of your work in progress photos showing the work in progress of the shield, which this being the Mash Curiolite, one of the very few things that I know, just being very vaguely familiar with the character, is that she has that big shield, right? It's kind of like cross-shaped, but it's very large. So, I mean, that's one of the things that you definitely got to have for if you're trying to like make it inspired by or in some way kind of related to that particular character, you got to have the shield, right? So I'd be interested to see like how the shield's coming along. But just as far as like the modification to the hair, I think it looks like It still needs to be cleaned up a bit, a bit more filing, a bit more sanding here and there, just on like the glued sections, just to get it looking nice and smooth, since they are supposed to be like flat, like mechanical panels basically that make up the kind of hair of the character, just to get everything nice and smooth. But otherwise, just kind of the general shape of everything so far looks convincing, the parts that are modified there on the hair. Is Discord a Patreon perk as well? Yes, Aaron, to answer your question, yep. So Mafiu said, I mixed runner scraps and cement. Okay, no, I already read that, sorry. I forgot to send a picture of the shield. That's fine. I've seen the shield on Discord, and for next month's episode, once you're a little bit farther along in this work in progress, you can send us update photos and then update the shield as well. But yeah, from what I saw of it, it was looking pretty cool. And of course, with it being still work in progress, it's kind of hard to get a good kind of visual, mental. It's hard to imagine exactly what it's going to look like when it's finished, because it's all different colors. That's one of the problems with kit bashing, is it's something that I struggle with. Maybe everybody's going to be different, but it's hard to like clearly picture what it's going to look like properly when it's all different colors. You need to kind of build it in a way that you think it's looking right, and then you kind of have to test it by just like spray some primer on it. That's why it's good. Like typically I would airbrush primer or surfacer, but having at least having a can of spray can primer on hand just for stuff like this, when you're working on a kit bash and you want to see okay, how's this looking, you just grab your spray can primer, just go outside, spray a little primer on it, just to at least get it kind of more uniform color, and you can kind of better visualize, okay, how is this looking so far? And you can kind of see, oh, these shapes don't really kind of match very well, so I need to work some more on this or that, something like that. So it's a good tool to have on hand. But yeah, so I think I'm going to change the shoulders to aerial to make them a bit more bulky. Okay, I was just going to say that if it's supposed to be kind of like a feminine character in like kind of robot form, looking at something like the Nobel Gundam is probably the most notable example of that. For inspiration would be a good thing to look at for inspiration. And on the Nobel Gundam, the shoulder armor is quite small. So I think for like a female looking character, if you wanted to look sort of female in form, having the small shoulders is probably good for that. But if you want it to look a bit more kind of bulky, a bit more armored or something, at least the aerial shoulders, I think actually like the curved design of the aerial shoulders would actually probably look pretty cool on this. They would make it, because like right now these type of shoulders make it look more like a grunt, like a gym kind of thing, right? Just because they're so simple and just a simple block shape. But the little bit kind of more curved and a slightly more ornamental shape of the aerial shoulders, I think would fit with your design quite well. Yeah, I think that'll look cool. So that's a good idea. All right. Otherwise, yeah, not too much else to look at with this at the moment, but I think that'll be interesting to see how this comes along for the next episode. Thank you. And yeah, share some more photos in the Discord as well. We'll take a look at those. All right, so taking a look at Edgar's here next. If Edgar is still in the chat, I know he was in there earlier. Can say what's up to everybody. Okay. So a couple of things he has. Number one is his work on the ECOS type Jegan. Yeah, right. We saw this last time, and there's just a bit more modification done to this. Doesn't seem to be too much change since last time we saw it. But if you guys remember, it's got obviously you can see here, Jesta legs and the Jesta shield, Jesta's beam rifle, hands, kind of all the Jesta parts kind of added onto the ECOS type Jegan. And yeah, I was saying last time that I think the parts go together quite well. Obviously, as you can see, there's still like a lot of just different cleanup work to be done on this, but I think it's looking pretty good. One thing that I might recommend, if you can, and it might be difficult to try to figure out exactly how to do this, but if you can, maybe find a way to make this knee joint a little bit further down into the Jesta's lower leg. Maybe make it so that this this circle part maybe fits into this indented section of the Jesta's lower legs. So maybe just like use a file or cut it or however you need to make this kind of square detail there of the Jesta's lower leg right there. Make that into like a circle, a cutout right there, and so that it kind of fits with the design. Because right now it just looks like the knee joint is quite far out from the leg, and less so on this knee just because of the angle of how we're seeing it, but just based on what I can tell, just kind of like seeing it from the side here, the knee joint seems quite elevated out of the leg armor there in a way that looks a bit unnatural. It's not really like super noticeable or anything, and then again, once it's all painted, it's probably going to be even less noticeable. But if you can, I think that would be a cool just kind of a little bit more modification just to make it look that much more cohesive there, the leg, so it doesn't look like, you know, part of the legs from this kit and part is from this kit and they're just kind of stuck onto each other. If you can do a little bit more modification there just to make the flow of the leg look kind of more natural, the way that the armor pieces and everything fit together. So yeah, that would be something I think that you could work on. But the other thing that he's showing us here in this photo is there's a couple other photos. Wasn't there another photo? Okay, yeah, here we go. Showing the modification to the elbow joint. So yeah, this was quite good in that even with the original one, it has this kind of circular detail, but the lower part of the arm doesn't have any kind of like circular cutout or anything like that. There is on the upper arm, and you've kept that, and this new elbow joint still kind of fits in with that. It's still kind of like a little bit low. It's not like kind of right in there like how the original one is, the circle kind of fitting into that cutout, but it doesn't look unnatural anyway. It looks like it's extended out because it's bent, and it looks convincing in that if the arm were to be straight, like that circle part would probably raise up to fit into that properly. So if we look at it here, kind of in effect, I think the elbow joint looks natural there, and it's good that you added that added this plot plate onto here as well. I think that also helps to make it look more natural because it helps to bulk out that joint, because if you just kept it just the gray plastic, it's kind of very thin, and in the arm it would look maybe a little bit weird, not as convincing. But kind of adding that plot plate onto there, I think definitely helps to make that look more natural as a actual working elbow joint there as it is. So that's looking good, I think. Yeah. And then these other photos I think are about the so this is the modification to the elbow to get that elbow joint in there. That would be the original one, I guess, and having just basically gut that whole section in order to get the new elbow joint in there. So yep, yeah, it's looking good. Yeah, so just, I mean, maybe take a stab at making a little bit more modification to that knee if you feel you want to. Otherwise, I think just, you know, once everything's getting all cleaned up, I think it's going to look quite cool. Are you planning on adding any more kind of like exterior details or anything to it too much, or just kind of going to leave it with kind of the existing detail and just kind of focus on the painting then for the next step, or any other further steps for any kind of more modification or details added or anything like that? Personally, I think you don't necessarily need it. I wouldn't think that it seems like lacking in detail. Especially one thing that can be difficult is if you're using two different kits, you might have a situation where one kit has a lot more surface detail on it than the other. And so when you take some parts from that kit and some parts from this kit, the overall design is going to look inconsistent, where you have a bunch of details over here and much less details here. But both of those kits, the Jesta and the Jegan, are both pretty low in terms of their surface detail on them. So I think it looks consistent as it is now, not having a whole lot of surface detail really on it. So I think you could just stick with that and just keep it as it is, or, you know, take the opportunity to add some more. So he said maybe some minor scribing. Yeah, I wouldn't overdo it. I think it looks, you know, perfectly good as it is. It's an HG, so it looks like an HG, which is fine. Sometimes less is more. But, you know, or if you want to go the route of Ryan and add a bunch of detail on it, it could definitely look cool. But I definitely wouldn't try to overdo it. Maybe just a couple of panel lines here and there. Maybe something like here on the toe, and I don't know. Yeah, maybe just like a couple of little ones, just like here on like the side of the leg. Just like do one of these kind of little deals. Kind of here, something like that. Pull out that panel. Small ones. I wouldn't. It's up to you, of course, but I wouldn't do too much. Like here on the shoulder, just do like a square detail, something like that at the bottom of the shoulder or something. But no, I think just for the design, I think the amount of detail that it has naturally, I think fits the design of that particular mobile suit quite well. So, yeah. All right, and then his other kit here is his contest entry from the Apex contest. So this was one of the ones that was, I think we probably had this in the 5th or 6th spot. It was right up there. So we ultimately had the top 4 entries won prizes, and this was one that we were considering, and it was almost one of the prize winners. So Edgar, I'm sorry that you didn't win a prize, but I hope that is at least kind of some sort of consolation that it was right up there and almost one of the winners, just because it was a really cool concept, using the heads and the body of the Zogok, right? Zogok? I think that's right? Yeah. To make this Mega Man design. It was almost one of the winners, but it just didn't have, it just wasn't quite as creative as some of the other winners, and wasn't quite as technically well done as some of the other winners, just in terms of like the painting of it. But the concept was really cool, so we definitely liked it, me and other judges. One thing that I will say though, we did find the face a bit creepy, and I hope you won't take that the wrong way. But just like, it was a little bit of that kind of, what do you call it? Uncanny valley, is that right? Of like robots that look too human, and not that it looks like too human, but it's got that kind of like haunted doll kind of look to it. So, I mean, that obviously wasn't anything that like we counted against you as far as like the contest goes, but it does kind of have that little bit kind of creepy look to it, right? But it was a really cool concept, and I think that you executed it quite well. I mean, you look at this and it's very obvious, like it's supposed to be Mega Man. So that's cool. And yeah, I think just the modifications that were done to this, most of which being like around here on the head. So like all this whole section like is all redone. And then just obviously the arms, giving him the arm. I think another thing that could have been cool here, this is like a quite small thing, but for this metallic red, if that had been then not so dark of a metallic red, but somewhat, I'm not exactly sure what would be, but a brighter metallic red, I think would have looked nice, would have helped to make that detail pop a bit more, because it's kind of dark, and especially with like the dark lighting as well, this detail is a little bit kind of lost in just that it's very dark, doesn't really stand out as much, and I think it would have been nice if that stood out a bit more with a brighter metallic red in there. The dead eyes, yes. So yeah, it was very cool, very nice build, and one of the top ones. Definitely, it was one of the honorable mentions. Here you go. Here's a work in progress photo. Sorry, so you can see. So you had to describe that detail, because the faceplate itself is just a circle, right? And so to make it this shape, that had to be modified and described and puttied to reshape that. So it's definitely some cool work done to change the shape of that. But there you go. Is Mega Man Apex. It's very cool. All right, let's take a look here next at Christian's Zaku. And actually Zaku and Ball, I should say. The focus is kind of on the Zaku, but there's a ball here as well. Let me put this up on the screen for you guys. So let's see. Oops. Get this so it fits the screen better for you guys. And let me refer back to his email where I don't think there was too much more commentary on this. But let me check. Here we go. So let's see. Anyway, so this is not really related to the build, but he said he used to build back in the 90s and early 2000s, but recently gotten back into it. A big fan of the 8th MS team, so he did the Zaku Mobility prototype. Awesome kit, by the way. I love that kit. It's so cool, especially as an 8th MS team fan. But this is from the first episode. The colors weren't correct for that version, so I did. So he tried repainting it to make it in the correct colors, with a more kind of gray and a little bit more kind of pinkish tone for that than what the original kit has, I think. I don't remember exactly what the colors are in the anime, but if you say so, if these are the more correct colors, I'll take your word for it. I can just tell that based on the kit, I think that pink is kind of more of a pinkish. It's a darker kind of black kind of color almost there, and more of a gray color around here for his build compared to the original kit anyway. I'd never painted any Gunpla before, so this was kind of an experiment. All right. So it's first time painting. There you go. I learned some things that I will definitely do differently in the future, but overall, I'm fairly pleased with how it turned out. I would definitely appreciate your input. Yeah. So I mean, if for a first job painting, it looks pretty good. Let's see if we can see here. It looks like there is maybe a little bit of some roughness to the paint here and there. I'm wondering if that black part is not painted. If maybe just like the pink and gray parts are painted, it looks like. Let's see. And he didn't mention anything in his email about the ball, but I mean, it's there, obviously. So I'm guessing that that was also done at the same time. I want to say that version of the HG ball was like that was a P Bandai set or something, wasn't it? You guys can refresh my memory. That was like a P Bandai set, or that was like parts to make the 8th MS team version of the HG ball. It was some sort of like exclusive set. You can't just get it like that straight up. But it looks like, from what I can tell, that maybe the black parts are not painted and other colored parts. Well, okay. Barring that, a couple of notes here for you. Number one is, whether you're painting or not, one thing just to help your builds look, that much better is sanding these mold lines. So these are going to be, you can have them kind of anywhere, but they do tend to be quite common in areas like this, elbow joints, knee joints, and everything. Just sanding those mold lines, just while you're in the construction process, it's the kind of thing that you can just do kind of as you're building that kind of, because those parts are a little bit more difficult to take apart. So if you want to kind of save yourself the effort of having to build the kit and then take those difficult joints apart, just sanding just while you're building it, and it's fairly easy to do just with a sanding stick, or a file is going to be more rough. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Just with a sanding stick, if you can, be the best bet. But sanding those mold lines, this particular kit has seam lines in the forearms here. That's something that, if you're just kind of getting, especially if it's your first attempt painting and you're just kind of getting back into Gunpla, then maybe you haven't done much practice with the seam line removal. And I would guess that there's a seam on the shoulder here as well, if we can find it in the picture. But it looks like maybe sanded the shoulder seam line. Looking for a good photo of it, but it's kind of hard to tell. You can see a little bit of the seam like here at the bottom, but on the top it looks like it's maybe sanded, or just we can't see it very well in the light. But anyway, yeah, seam line removal. I actually have a video dedicated to removing this exact seam line on this kit, just because there's so many different versions of this Origin Zaku kit, and they all have that seam line on the forearm. So it's a really common one, and it's such a fantastic kit that otherwise doesn't have any other like real notable seam lines on it. It's just the shoulder armor and the forearm. And it's a pretty easy one to get rid of. So just for future reference, if you're building any more versions of this particular kit in the future, you can refer back to that video, or just ask. And yeah, it's a pretty easy modification there for that forearm seam line. Let's see. Oh, here, Christian's here in the chat. Good. Didn't paint the black, but would like to go back and redo that. Yeah. So, I mean, you certainly can. And UC Zeta Gundam said the 8th MS team ball is a P-band die, but it also includes the shark moth ball. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was like a set that had option parts to make a couple different versions, right? And yes, what's the name of the video? I'm not sure what. Oh, Drowsy. The name of the video for that particular seam line removal part. Let me see. It's where are we? Zaku origin seam removal. I don't know. I'm sure I can find it here. Here you go. It is. Let me put it on the screen here. Here you go. This one. 1412. HD the origin Zaku seam removal. If you go there, it's right there. So yeah, that video will show you. I think I was thinking that the video only covered the seam in the forearm, but it looks like I did on the shoulder as well. So there you go. Everything you need to know for this particular kit, seam line removal wise. Anyway, like I said, it's a pretty simple modification there for that. Shaka, you nearly missed the stream. Shaka, I looked at your build first, so if you want to go back and check that out, or if you want to wait and go back later, we have Christian's here we're looking at, and then we have one more Chris's to look at here before the end of the stream. So if you want to wait and go back, or if you want to go back now, it's fine. But welcome. All right, so yeah, that would be the main things. Otherwise, it looks like the pen aligning was probably done with the pen align pen. That would be my guess, which I would not recommend using on anything painted. You can. I would recommend using some other different kind of paint though, especially if you've already painted that. Using just one of these. The Penaline accent color. On these, you'd probably see people using it all the time. It's super easy to use. That's why probably one of the most easy options, and especially if you've already painted the kit. But I mean, I've used it in many videos. You'll see other people using it all the time. One thing just to keep in mind though, when using a product like this on your kit, if the parts are already painted, that's gonna give you a little bit more protection. But one thing you'll hear people talk about all the time with this is that it will damage your plastic, and it certainly can if you're not careful. But the main thing is just to be careful with it. Don't slop a bunch of it on there, especially if it's unpainted. If it's painted, that helps protect the plastic a little bit. But still, like, especially in these kind of joint sections, what you want to avoid is getting a bunch of this down inside these joints, where it's not able to, where the what do I want to say? The solvent in it is not able to evaporate quickly. If it's just right there on the surface of the part, the solvent can evaporate quick enough that it's not going to eat into your plastic too much. But once it gets down inside of there, it's just kind of sitting there, not evaporating, and the solvent's eating away at the plastic and weakens it, and then it can break. So yeah, you want to be careful with that. But if you use it, sparingly, just properly touch it in there and wait a little bit, clean it up. It'll give you better looking results than using a Gundam marker on that. So Christian here said, I didn't attempt any seam line removal on this, but I will on my next build. Just put the ball there for reference to the seam. But I did do some minor color correcting on that as well. Yeah, it's all good. No, I think, the painting overall, I'm wondering how it was painted. I'm going to guess this was done with spray can. Is that right? For the parts that are painted. And did you use any top coat? It sort of looks like it is top coated, but I'm not sure. Maybe not. So that's one thing, especially if you're going to have a kit that's, if you don't want to paint the whole thing, but you want to have some parts painted, some parts not, what you're probably going to end up with is the parts that aren't painted are going to look more shiny. They're going to look more like just shiny plastic, because that's what they are, compared to parts that are painted, depending on the paint that you use, whether it's a glossy or a more matte finish or a semi-gloss type of paint. Just depends on the paint you're using. But a lot of times what you'll get if it's not fully painted is you'll get inconsistent finishes. Some parts will be more matte finish, some parts will be more glossy. And then just spraying the whole thing with a top coat once it's done is a good way to just give the entire kit a even finish of whatever it is that you want, semi-gloss or matte or gloss or whatever the case may be. Let's see. Yes, spray can. And he says, I'm about to buy an airbrush soon. I did top coat it to knock down the gloss on the pink. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you are planning to buy an airbrush soon, I think you'll definitely enjoy that. And, you'll definitely notice that you'll find that it's a little bit intimidating at first, but once you get going on it, you're going to be much more happy with the results. I think so. You'll definitely enjoy that, and you'll definitely see that you're able to get much better results in the finish. The other thing that I would recommend you to try out, aside from the airbrush, is waterside decals rather than the included sticker decals, because those are also going to look better on your finished build. So you can see, like here with these, the problem with these sticker decals is that you can see the outline, kind of square outline around them. And unless you cut really super carefully, like right up against the printed decal, you're going to have these square outlines. And especially for really small little caution markings and stuff like that, it's going to just kind of ruin the look, ruin the effect of those looking like natural, like printed on decals, right? So waterside decals, a lot of watersides, you're still going to have a little bit of an outline, but that is something it's much less. And there's ways to kind of lessen that. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of different things that, you can work on for future builds. But I think for, your first time trying out some painting, I think it looks good, actually. Yeah. I've seen, a lot of times people's first attempt painting much worse. So I think you did all right for the first one. And there's things to work on for future builds, but it's always good to just, have a good learning experience with this one. And, you're happy with the result, and you can see things that can be done better next time. And then that's what you do on the next one. And then, you just kind of keep building up your skill set with each build, kind of one thing you try out, and then the next thing you try something else out, and the next one you try something else out. And then you get to a point where you plateau and you feel like, now I have to try all like the really difficult techniques, and it gets much more difficult from there. But at least for now, they're fairly easy steps for your next couple steps in progression, and you should be very happy with the results, I feel like. So looking forward to seeing, the second and the third painted builds. I think you'll see, and then we'll see if you continue to share them for our future critique episodes. You'll see the improvement there quite drastically. All right, let's look at Chris's. Here, his double Zeta Fortune Meow resin conversion kit for the MG double Zeta. No notes from me, Chris. Not really too much else for me to comment on this one, but he sent some work in progress photos first, and then kind of in between him originally sending his work in progress photos, he finished the build. So there's work in progress photos, and there's also finished ones. But even his work in progress photos here, like some of these are kind of like mostly finished. This one's maybe one of the lesser finished work in progress photos, where you just got like the painting done and the pen aligning done, just without the decals. But we've got some finished photos here, and yeah, it's really good. Chris did a great job as usual in his signature Chris style. Still waiting on Chris to try out something at least slightly weathered. That's what I'm waiting on from Chris. He's already proven himself to be able to do the clean builds. Although I will say with this one, Chris, I can't say that I approve of the lack of purple on this one. It's very un-Chris to not have any purple on there. I assume there's maybe a little, well, I don't know, looking at that blue, I was going to say, I assume there's a little bit of purple added in with the blue, but that blue is looking pretty blue. I don't know. Even the reds. And you could have at least gone with a little bit of purple mixed in there. There might be like a half a drop of purple mixed in with that blue, but not very much. But no, yeah, it's awesome. I love the details on this. Of course, this is a resin conversion kit for that. So you've got all these nice little details and added panel lines and just little bits of separation here and there. So obviously a kit like this takes a lot of masking and a lot of complex painting to bring out all little details and everything, but it looks really good. I wanted to see the legs, close up on the legs. Where is a good photo? Here we go. I love the little details here, the little orange bits right there. Those are nice and match in color. Are those the same as this yellow-orange color? I guess so. It looks like it. But yeah, very nice with the colors on this. The paint, the accent colors. Going back to kind of what we were talking about with Shaka's build, one thing what we were talking about with yours, Shaka, was what you mentioned about the multi-tones of white. This one's it's kind of close to like what Shaka is doing with his build with the Neo, having, you know, basically kind of 3 different colors of white: your white, your gray white, and your kind of tan white. But this one I think is a little bit more closer to what I was talking about, having it with the balance of like the percentage of which color, where this is still like mostly, at least like most of like the large sections of armor are all in the pure white, and the off-white colors are relegated to the smaller sections of armor. So, I mean, I guess if you were to add it up, I'm not sure exactly what the percentage would be, but it still gives the appearance of predominantly being pure white. And then you have small sections, which there is quite a lot of them, of the off-white sections. There's a lot. But it doesn't look quite as evenly mixed in terms of like percentage of each color like we saw with Shaka. Is one of the things, Shaka, when you go back and see the commentary on yours, that's one of the things I was talking about with your build earlier. The trick is to use different base colors below the same color to get different tones. The focus on this build was the flow of the colors. Wait, what? Use different base colors below the same color? Oh. What? I mean, yes, wouldn't you? Anyway, I'm guessing what Chris is saying. What are you saying, Chris? That I mean, by base colors, you mean like the primer, or that you're just using the same color and then just like adding a drop of gray into your white to make the off-white gray, and then adding a drop of tan into the white to make your like off-white tan? Is that what you were saying? That like, even though there's like 3 or 4 different tones of white, it's all the same white paint, and you've just used other different colors to tint that, basically. Which, yes, I feel like that's what Chris is saying. But yes, that would be my advice as well, for using different color surfacers under the same color to get tones. Okay. Use some pink. Oh, that's great. Okay, so he's not talking about, sorry, Chris, I think we were talking about different things. But anyway, yes, that's another thing that you can do. And unfortunately, we don't have any work in progress photos of that for reference, Chris. But yes, that's another thing that you can do. Sure. When you are doing your surfacer, or even just, so the primer, the primer surfacer, you know, most people generally are going to use, you know, one color surfacer for the entire kit. But of course, one thing you can do is use different color surfacer for different parts. So like, you know, gray for your frame, if your frame is going to be gray. Or in this case, I think he used just Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think I saw your paint list and it was just Nazca. I would imagine you just use the Nazca primer paint for the frame, which is kind of meant to be, it's a primer that's meant to be like as your paint color as well. So it's meant to be a primer that you can use, and then that's your color. You don't need to paint another color additionally on top of that. I'm guessing that's probably what was used for the frame on this. But then, yeah, so like the parts of the build that are red and yellow, then you would use pink primer. The parts that are white, you would use either a white or a light gray primer, and under the blue parts as well. Like for this particular one, I mean, if you wanted all those colors to be nice and bright, I would have just used white under the blue sections as well, but light gray probably could have worked just as well. I use it as a color primarily, but yes, it can be primer as well. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I've done that on a couple of builds, and what would be the most recent one? I don't know. I have to think back, but I believe actually on the Resin God Gundam that I did. Speaking of resin kits, I think on the Resin God Gundam, I also did that, a mix of different color primers for different sections of the kit, if I remember correctly, because I wanted like a nice pure white on the white sections, and I wanted a really bright colors. So you could just use white under everything, and then your colors would be bright. But to get like really rich, like reds and yellows, using a pink primer is really good for that. So anyway, yeah, very well done. I like it, and the decals are nice. What decals are those? They're not mecha decals. So Tim's gonna be mad. Some of them might be, but I don't think those are. Those are just high Q decals, aren't they? Admit it, Chris. They're not mecha decals. You've tossed your friend to the wind and went with the. Let's see. What are those? Because that's something different. Or is that a decal set that came with the kit? Now that I'm looking at it, that might be something that came with the kit. I'm not sure. Which are probably based on high Q decals, but it's kind of a little bit more, including some different ones that are kind of more particular to this design. Some mecha decals, some high Q, some stock. Stock ones are terrible. Yeah, I mean, with these resin kits, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes they come with good decals, but more often than not, they're probably the decals included with a set like this are probably not going to be that good. But then, yeah, with considering it's a Verca kit, the base kit, like the stock one, that would be what he's referring to there. The stock decals would be all your Verca decals, which are also can be kind of, I mean, you get a lot, which is great. You get a lot of quality, but not, you get a lot of quantity, but not always so much quality. That's what I want to say. Yeah. I remember using some of the stock decals for the Gundam Mark V, which is not a Verca, but it's a master grade from Bandai that includes waterside decals, which is usually, that means it's a Verca. It's pretty rare to see anything other than a Verca, but in that case, the Mark V, yeah. Some of the decals for the Mark V, like the line of text was just a line. There was not actually any like text. So yeah, Bandai do be like that sometimes with their decals. Anyway, thank you, Chris. Beautiful build, of course, but you didn't need me to tell you that. Come on. There's not really too much else I can say. Sorry, Chris. There's not really too much else I can say about that. It's, yeah, a really nice build. I couldn't really give you any other like real critique on that. I think you did a really good job. It looks really nice. I wouldn't have wanted anything else. It's off the screen now. Sorry, but I'm still just kind of looking at the photos here. I wouldn't have said that it needs any more detail or any more color separation or anything like that, just because I think just what the kit has, I think that's probably about the max. I wouldn't have gone anything more than that in terms of the amount of color separation and details. I think that's already about as much as anything that I would want personally. But yeah, fantastic. I do one thing. I'll just put this back up on the screen here for a second, because probably my favorite part. Let me find a good photo example of this. Probably my favorite part. Let's put this one up. Let me just open this. I'll give you this little bit here. Put this back on the screen for a second. Probably my favorite is the two-tone red. The two-tone red on the wings looks so cool. That's really nice. The whole thing looks great, but I do really like that two-tone red. That's really nice. With the really bright red and it's a quite stark contrast between the two reds. They're quite different, but they look really nice together. It doesn't look like, too out of place or anything. There's some of that on the foot as well. Kind of harder to see because very little of that dark red on the foot, but on the wing parts, it looks really nice. It's a little nice accent point there in terms of the color separation that I really appreciated. So very cool. That's it, guys, for this episode. That was all of the submissions that we had for this episode. 5 out of 10 build is too good from IGN. Yeah, something like that. That's a great example of different surfaces under the same red. Oh, okay, so you did different surfaces under those red sections. Interesting. I would have assumed that's just all pink primer under there, but under the darker red sections was that gray primer under there, and then like pink under the brighter red. Maybe that's the reason why it looks so nice. Nicely done. But yeah, that's gonna be it for the live stream today, guys. So today's Thursday. Not gonna be any sort of live stream tomorrow, so nothing else this week. But next week there'll be more live stream. Don't know exactly what it will be yet, but of course I'll let you guys know. Let's see. 2023 is the year when Chris will build an epic weathered kit and something. Maybe we can get Chris to even like hand paint a kit. Ooh, something like that. See if we can get him to try it. I'm gonna send Chris. I'll send you like one of the not Notchin, but one of the Gotcha 35 Gotcha Nen, like one of the 1/35 scale like capsule machining Krieger suit kits. You can hand paint that up for something very, very different to what you just saw there with the 100 scale airbrushed, very sharp and crispy painted 100 scale Gundam kits. Be something very, very different for you to try out. You should try it, Chris. I'm telling you, it's going to open up a whole new world for you. You're going to get tired of all these clean paint jobs on stuff all the time. And I like them as much as the next guy, but who knows? You might like it. Take a walk on the wild side. But that's it for Canarium Rust Purple. Yeah, just use purple as your rust like accent color. Sure, why not? That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much to all of my Patreon supporters, the ones who submitted for today's episode, and just all of them. Thank you guys all so much for your support. Thank all of you guys for watching the episode, for checking it out. If you want to check back some of the later episodes, this is episode 26. So it should be like right around there. So we've got 25 past episodes to check out if you want. See some of the previous submissions from some of these same builders and others. So I think that just about covers it. We've got the new next contest will be announced probably next week. So stay tuned for that. If you guys have been paying attention, you should probably already know what the theme of the contest is going to be. But in case you haven't figured it out, hopefully it'll be a nice surprise for everybody. But that should be ready to reveal to you guys next week. Other than that, I think that's about it for now. So have a great Friday and weekend, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.